Good day, everyone, and welcome back to the Experience Talk podcast. Till now, we have talked a lot about customer experience, employee experience, looked through the customer eyes and been into the employee shoes. But there's one thing common here, the human part of it. Be it customers or employees, they're both human beings. And today, we'll talk about their experience as a whole, that is human experience. So let me welcome our today's guest, Neal Dlin, the Chief Human Experience Officer at Choristry, and along with him, NK, our CX Head at Service Ensem. Welcome to the podcast, Neal, and thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, can you share a little bit about yourself, Neal?
Oh my goodness. That's always the hardest question. everything else, every, everything else is easy. I'm a very multifaceted person. No, yeah, sure. I'll give you just some highlights. I don't want to bore you with it. So I've been kind of doing this work for 25 years. And we'll talk more about this because I think it influences much of the discussion. But I've been doing it for 25 years. I started out in one part of the business, and I grew, sort of vertically into sort of senior positions in one part of, I guess, what you'd consider to be the customer experience, and then I expanded more broadly, working across the whole journey, and then I started to do consulting work. Then that work dug in deeper into employee experience and so on. I don't want to go into my whole career, but suffice it to say, it's been a long journey, and it's been a fun journey. I would also say that I'm a father of three wonderful kids. I'm a husband of a far more intelligent than I am wife. And I also like to produce musical theater for charity when I have spare time. But all of it is informed. I bring this all up because HX, or human experience, is not just an organizational or corporate thing. It's part of our day-to-day life. It's how we make the world better. Yep. And when we think about it, and we have a tremendous power to impact our friends, our family, our customers, our employees when we are mindfully thinking about the human experience. So it informs everything that I do.
Okay. And how, is that the reason that you started Choristry, Neal?
I started I'm a big believer in honesty and transparency. I started Choristry and originally because I have really bad ADD, and I found that I got to a stage where I was working for companies at the senior level, at the highest levels, and I would start something, I would build something, I would transform something, it would be running really well, and then I would be like, okay, well, what's next? I need more. I need more. I need to variety. I need to keep building and changing. Once it's running really well, I would hope that the people who I brought onto my team are so skilled, that they can run this. They don't need me to run it. So I originally got into consulting just because I wanted to be working on more projects with more companies and be exposed to more thinking and have that variety.
Okay.
So that's just the honest answer. That's where I started Choristry. Where it evolved to is very different. I'm much more motivated now by this idea that we have this ability, and I would say obligation, to contribute to a better world, and we can do that and be profitable, and we can do that and have fun. We should do that. So how can companies do that? And that's where I get excited about now. But in the beginning, it was just because I needed to.
I can see the excitement in your voice, Neal, once you are explaining about it. And the energy that you showed has already started giving me goosebumps. And now that's an honest thing.
Oh, that's awesome. Thank you. That's awesome to hear.
I love the energy. Okay, so let's get to the first question that I have for you today. We generally talked about CX and EX before, so this is the first time even we are talking about it. I'm very curious. I think NK has so many thoughts on this, but for me, it's all new. So how would you define human experience?
Yeah, I was thinking about this because I think I don't want us to get trapped in corporate speak. Human
Mhm.
experience is something all of us can define, because
Right.
the core of human experience is that it's the things that we all share and the things that we all need to live our best lives.
Right.
So anyone can describe it, but where I lean on a lot in terms of how it informs my work, both my work and my personal relationships, is rooted in psychology.
Mm-hmm.
It's not new. Like, I think it was, I don't know, I want to say 70, 80 years ago, something like that. Maslow came up with our hierarchy of needs. It's the same for every person. It manifests in different nuances, but it's the same no matter where you live, or your religion, your race, your political view. No matter where you are, we all have these needs. It's how we're wired.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
We all need shelter. We all need
Right.
food. We all
Right.
need safety and security and stability. We all need, and that's at the bottom. So at the bottom, I don't know if you're familiar with Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but at the bottom of the hierarchy of needs are the physiological things like that: food, shelter, water, warmth, clothing, protection. The next level up is safety. So,
Right.
safety translates to security of employment. It translates to our home, and our mental safety, which, by the way, is hugely impacted by both as employees and customers by our workplaces. And the next level up is this sense of belonging, connection, friendship, family, intimate connections, which, I can get into this whole thing around leadership, and how people leave companies because of their leaders. We know that, but what's the
Right.
why? What's the real reason why? We
Mm-hmm.
need a certain trust and sense of connection, which takes to the next level, which is esteem. We need a certain amount of respect, trust, a sense of achievement, being recognized for that achievement, pride. These are inherent needs. Like, these are indisputable needs we all have, customers and employees. And then at the top of the pyramid is self-actualization. So, which to me is the most fascinating of all, because
Mm-hmm.
we see these companies emerging and arising that are winning because they are really purpose driven. So if you think about self-actualization, if you think about words like reaching my full potential,
Mm.
feelings of morality, being able to use creativity, spontaneity, solving problems, lack of prejudice. So if you're at the top of this pyramid, you have this thing: what do I really believe is really important? How do I use all of my skills and individual experiences? How do I bring them all to bear in a creative way, in an empowered way, to reach my full potential that aligns with what I believe? And then if you want
Right.
to layer in another side of that, which is, what does the company believe? And
Right.
is my beliefs aligned? If you can bring those three things together, the company's purpose, my beliefs,
Mm.
and an environment where I can reach my full potential, you're not going to you'll have an employee for life. You'll have customers for life if they can be part of that, right? Because this is the ultimate need we all have.
Right.
And you
Right.
have, and again, thinking about that hierarchy of needs, the bottom level, you got to make sure that's there.
Right.
So, and I think there was a generation in the early to mid 1900s where companies and employees didn't go past the very first tier of that hierarchy. You know what? This job pays the bills. It puts a roof over our head. It puts clothes on our back. It's good enough for me. You'd see parents arguing with their hippie children. Why isn't it good enough for you? And it's evolved, right? So
Right.
so and companies are competing for talent, so they're evolving too, right? So they're evolving to that mid stage of the hierarchy. Is, I think, where most companies are starting to find themselves.
Right.
That's where employee engagement surveys happen, or voice of the customer surveys happen. They happen at this mid level.
Mm-hmm.
How do we create a sense of belonging? How do we create connections? We hear we have to be empathetic, which is true. You have to create trust between you and your employee, between you and your customer. This is fulfilling a very important part of that hierarchy. A sense of accomplishment. We hear about gamification, both for customers and employees, which is which is kind of a transactional sense of accomplishment versus an intrinsic sense of accomplishment. But, these are things that companies are doing and living in. We want to make sure employees feel respected and heard. We want to be transparent. People are starting to change their interview process. How do we be more honest about our challenges so that our employees can interview us? People are being more focused on how do we, you hear human-centered design, which is different than what I do, but it's rooted in this notion of how do we walk a mile in the shoes of our employees and customers? How do we bring them into the process of designing things that affect them and iterate and prototype and test and measure and constantly, optimize that. But all of this is still in the middle of the hierarchy. It hasn't reached the self-actualization, and it's emerging. You see it. You see it in companies like Dove and Ben and Jerry's and Patagonia, and there's lots of examples of companies that are emerging into this place where the employee can live the entire pyramid of our hierarchy of needs. I was remember talking with some company. They're like, well, what if we come up with a purpose and a belief and our employees don't believe in it? Doesn't align. I said, that's okay. It's an evolution. It's a transition. Some people will gravitate towards it, and your productivity will go up. Your advocacy will go up. Your experience for employees and customers will go up. And other people will slowly say, I don't believe in this. It doesn't align to me. But what will be so amazing for you is that purpose, if you really live it authentically, will become a siren call. And all the people out there who don't work for you, who believe in what you believe in, the talent that you're so desperate to go after will come. And you don't have to 50% outperform on wage. You don't have to have kombucha dispensers in your cafeteria and a ping pong table, although those are nice things that companies like to say, look who we are, look at our culture, we have a ping pong table. No, you have to have something that is higher order, that people who align to it can see and understand. You have to live it every day. I said Patagonia lives it. It informs their decisions. They have a lot of beliefs in environmental and sustainability, and sustainable capitalism is a term that comes up. So they were famous. I mean, you could watch any movie about Silicon Valley and everyone's got their Patagonia vests on with their company name, and the finance companies have their Patagonia vest. It was like a badge of honor. I got my Patagonia vest. But you know what? This talent moves from company to company, and all of a sudden those old vests are like garbage, which is not sustainable. Yeah. And Patagonia, by the way, that's a chunk of revenue that Patagonia said, nope, we don't need that revenue. That isn't the revenue that aligns with our belief system. And that won't make them suffer. It'll make them richer. It'll make them attract even more talent to become even more competitive. And it'll also attract a client base and a customer base who are feverish fans because they're so aligned. Not just like, oh, it's a nice soft fleece, but it's like, I want one even more now because these guys are authentic. They are real. So I'm sorry. I know I'm keep going off on a soapbox.
That's okay. No, that's okay. I think I got the gist. So there's something that I can relate to as well, which you mentioned about some people would believe in the vision that you have, the purpose that you have, and some will not. And that's normal. Just accept it and attract the ones who would believe. That's it. That's what you want, right?
Of course. You know what I said to somebody once, you don't want a football team of 20, and I say I'm using football in the American
rugby. We call it rugby. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's similar. So, you don't want a football team of 20 really happy quarterbacks. Your goal isn't to make everybody happy. Your goal is to have all the right people, and them to be really understanding what role they play and how they connect and how they add value. The linebacker, all these different positions are needed. But some companies get lost in everyone has to be happy. What if people don't like that? But that doesn't help you or them, by the way. They're not going to be happy in the long run. So anyway.
No, I agree.
I want to take it back a little bit, the conversation. And Neal, I have a question. You said that the the employees can learn the values over the period of time, right? So it does it necessary that during the hiring process, when we are hiring and we have a company values, certain values that builds the structure of it. And I have seen that some of the HR focus on the employee interviews based on those core values, and they evaluate and give ratings. Do you think it's a fair practice, or what is your thoughts on that?
I love giving ratings on values. Uh, I'd love to see. I'd love to see that how you calibrate that. Um, so so many things to unpack. What you just said. Here's what I'll say a few things. So I have worked with, I don't know how many organizations you guys have worked with. I don't know how many organizations. I have yet to find that organizations whose values, whatever words they use or language they use, run contradictory to any of our basic human values. No company says, we value cheating. We value lies. For us, it's important that we do not cooperate with each other. Seriously, I do lots of work with companies on values. The words don't matter at the top of that, like what the 4 or 5 values are, because they're never going to be anything that someone's going to say, I just can't get my head around teamwork. It's never going to happen. But then that manifests differently. So underneath the values, if you're really building out like let's say a human experience framework or a customer experience framework, is what does that mean to us? Where do we live in the space? What does that mean with our brand? Who do we want to be? So in some companies, you might really celebrate people who challenge the status quo regularly. And in other companies, you might really value people who can get behind an idea. And sometimes those things can sometimes have tension between them. And neither of them are wrong or bad. But how they manifest in your particular organization might not be the same as somebody else's. And that really isn't necessarily something that can be taught. I mean, I'm, as you guys can tell, I'm an interrupter. I'm a status quo challenger. I will be in a boardroom with the board of directors and like cut somebody off and challenge them, and that may not be welcomed in some circles, yep. and in others it would be something you would celebrate. Right. And that I'm not going to change that. So I do think it's important. I do think it's important to know who you are as a company and how you play in that space of whatever your values are, and how does it actually manifest. So companies do a really good job when they tell stories, about when they use the language that defines their values in their everyday conversations, in how they talk in meetings about decisions, and how they coach employees that they're using that same, language that they've agreed upon defines each of their values. And in terms of hiring, so I know I had so much to unpack on what you said. In terms of hiring, I've got very strong views on hiring. I actually think hiring is probably one of the most critical elements of the employee journey. Right. That is the most set up for failure in many organizations. So many companies put people in the position of hiring with so little training on how to do that effectively. Mm-hmm. And they rely heavily on hiring guides with behavioral and situational questions that honestly, in 2 minutes before an interview, I can Google up what are the most common behavioral and situational questions and prepare my answers. Yeah. And so all that tells you is at least I have good due diligence and I've done homework, which is still a great thing. Yeah. But it doesn't tell you anything that the situational behavioral questions were meant to uncover. So great hiring practices stem from getting to really know the whole person in front of you, getting to have an unscripted conversation. How do you put somebody at ease? How do you donate your vulnerability to give them permission to expose theirs, and so that you can get to a deeper level of who they are and understand what's really important to them. And that's not an easy skill as an interviewer. And that's just one critical skill. How do you actually create a discussion that gets to know Neal? The resume is there. Like, do you need to spend an hour? I've seen interviewers spend an hour going over the resume. Are you just corroborating that the resume is matching what the person's saying? Like, what's the point of that? You have that information. And the situational questions are gamed. So what's the point of that? How do you get to know Neal? And once you do, does Neal sound like the kind of person that will, continue to propel our values? And if so, can we train Neal on the gaps that he may have in this technical aspect of the role? And I think it's hard to teach people, A, how to create that conversation, and B, what are the markers that you're looking for? When you do that, when you get someone to open up, how do you translate their answers into what that will manifest in their jobs? It's a very challenging skill, but when you can do it well, you will hire totally different people than you originally were hiring, and you will have a different team who are capable of so much more. Who are bought in to your purpose, who live your values, and you now have this. It's a different. You might be slower to onboard them to their role, but you have risen the roof on the potential of what they're capable of, and you get into the self-actualization at the top of the pyramid there. It's because you brought them in that way.